My name is Sarah. I'm 28 years old, and I was holding my breath in that cold courtroom while the judge stared at the crumpled piece of paper. The silence was heavy. Beside me sat a fragile 7-year-old boy who had not spoken a single word in his entire life. My hands were shaking so much I had to hide them. I had spent 3 grueling weeks teaching him how to write just for this chance, but I never imagined the secret he would reveal. To understand how we got to that tense moment, I need to take you back. I was completely lost in life. I had bounced from job to job, feeling empty. A friend suggested I volunteer at a local children's shelter to find some perspective. That place changed my life forever. On my first day, the noise was overwhelming. Kids were running, shouting, crying. I felt entirely out of my depth. That is when the shelter director walked up to me. Her name was Emily, a tired but kind woman of 32 years old, carrying a massive stack of folders. Emily sighed heavily and looked at me with sympathetic eyes. She told me the system was broken. They had too many kids and not enough funding. She warned me that my heart would break every single day I walked through those doors. She was not lying about that at all. She gave me a tour of the worn-down facility. Paint was peeling off the walls, toys were broken. Then, in the corner of the chaotic playroom, I saw him, a little boy just sitting alone on the floor, staring blankly at a blank wall while madness swirled around him. I asked Emily about him. She frowned and told me his name was Leo. He was 7 years old. He had been found abandoned in a terrible situation. The trauma was so severe that he simply stopped talking. He had never uttered a word since arriving at the shelter months ago. My heart sank into my stomach. I walked over to him slowly, trying not to startle him. I sat on the floor beside him. He did not even blink or acknowledge my presence. He was locked inside a dark prison of his own mind. I felt an overwhelming urge to reach him somehow. Over the next few days, I made it my mission just to sit near him. I didn't push, I just existed in his space. I noticed he would intensely watch the other kids coloring, but he never tried to grab a crayon himself. His little hands were always clenched into tight fists. One afternoon, I slid a single blue crayon across the floor toward him. It bumped against his shoe. He flinched. For a full minute, neither of us moved. Then, very slowly, his tiny fingers uncurled. He reached out and touched the blue wax. A tiny spark lit up in his eyes. That small victory was shattered the very next morning. Emily pulled me into her cramped office. She looked defeated. She told me the state had made a decision about Leo. Because of his severe communication issues, they considered him unadoptable and highly problematic. My stomach turned into knots. I asked her what that meant. Emily explained they were transferring him to a specialized state institution in exactly 3 weeks, a cold, clinical place for lost causes, a place where a fragile boy like Leo would absolutely fade away forever. I felt a surge of hot anger. How could they just throw him away like garbage? I argued with Emily. I told her he was smart, that he was just terrified. The shelter director shook her head sadly. She said the judge only cares about progress reports, and Leo had 0 progress. I left her office feeling sick. I looked at Leo, still clutching that blue crayon. He needed a voice. If he could not speak, he had to communicate another way. He had to prove to the judge that he was present, that he had a mind and a soul. I decided I would teach him to write. I had 0 training in special education. I had 3 weeks to do the impossible. The next day, I brought a huge pad of paper and thick pencils. I sat next to him and wrote my name. I pointed to myself. Then I wrote his name. I pointed to him. He just stared at the paper. The first week was pure torture. Every time I tried to place the pencil in his hand, he would drop it. He would turn his back to me. Sometimes he would silently cry, tears streaming down his face without a single sound. It broke me. I went home every night feeling like a failure. I remember sitting in my car after a particularly awful day, sobbing against the steering wheel. I called Emily. I told her I could not do it. I was making him more anxious. I felt like I was torturing him with my selfish need to fix things. I was ready to quit right then. The shelter director did not pity me. She told me to dry my tears. She said Leo had been given up on by every single adult in his life. If I walked away now, I was just confirming what he already believed, that he was worthless. Her harsh words were exactly what I needed. I went back the next day with a new strategy. No pressure, no forcing the pencil. I started drawing simple pictures, a house, a dog, a tree. Underneath each picture, I wrote the word in big, clear letters. I did this for hours while he watched me from the corner of his eye. On the 10th day, a miracle happened. I drew a sad face. I wrote the word sad. I left the pencil on the paper and backed away. Leo slowly crawled over. His hand trembled as he picked up the pencil. With clumsy, jagged strokes, he traced over my letters, S-A-D. I slapped a hand over my mouth to stop myself from screaming. I gently pushed another piece of paper toward him. I drew a happy face. I wrote happy. He traced it again. The connection was made. The wall was finally crumbling. We had exactly 11 days left until the hearing. From that moment on, we worked like possessed people. We skipped playtime. We skipped snacks. We sat on the floor, surrounded by crumpled paper. I taught him the alphabet. I held his hand to guide the curves of the letters. His fingers were so stiff, but his determination was fierce. It was not easy. He would get frustrated when his letters looked messy. He ripped up papers. He threw pencils across the room. I just sat there patiently, handing him a new sheet every time. I kept telling him that his words mattered. I told him he was important. By the end of the second week, he was no longer just tracing. He was copying words from memory. He learned to spell his name, L-E-O. When he wrote it independently for the first time, he looked up at me. It was the first time he ever made direct eye contact with me. The final week was a blur of anxiety. The state social worker arrived to do her final evaluation. She stood over us with a clipboard, looking completely unimpressed. She noted his silence. I tried to show her his writing, but she dismissed it as mere mimicking. She coldly told me that drawing letters does not equate to emotional stability. She sealed his file and said the judge would sign the transfer order on Friday. I felt a cold dread wash over me. The system was blind. They did not care about his soul, only their protocol. The night before the hearing, I stayed late at the shelter. I sat with Leo in his dim room. I gave him a special notebook and a pen. I told him that tomorrow we were going to meet an important man in a black robe. I told him this man needed to know who Leo really was. I asked him to write something for the judge, anything, just a message from his heart. I left him alone with the notebook. When I came back an hour later, he was asleep, clutching a folded piece of paper to his chest. I did not read it. I trusted him. The morning of the hearing was gloomy and raining. The courthouse was a massive, intimidating stone building. We sat on hard wooden benches in the hallway. Leo was trembling like a leaf. I held his hand tightly, whispering that he was brave and that I was right there with him. When they called his case, we walked into the sterile courtroom. The judge looked exhausted. He had a stack of files a mile high. He barely glanced at us as we took our seats. The state social worker stood up and immediately started reading her damning report. She droned on about his unresponsiveness. She used words like severely delayed, emotionally detached, and a burden to the foster system. Every word she spoke was like a dagger. I looked at Leo. He was staring at the floor, clutching his folded piece of paper so hard his knuckles were white. Panic exploded in my chest. I could not let this happen. Without thinking, I jumped out of my chair. I yelled out, interrupting the judge. I told him the report was wrong. I told him this boy had a voice and a beautiful mind, and that sending him away would destroy him. The judge slammed his gavel down hard. The sharp crack echoed through the room. He glared at me with pure fury. He warned me that I was out of order and threatened to have the bailiff remove me from the courtroom. The social worker smirked. I felt tears of absolute despair. I thought I had failed. I thought it was over. But then the most incredible thing happened. While the judge was yelling at me, little Leo stood up. He let go of my hand. He slowly walked right up to the heavy wooden bench where the judge was sitting. The entire courtroom fell dead silent. Even the angry judge stopped talking. He looked down at the tiny, fragile boy standing before him. Leo reached up with his trembling hand. He offered the folded piece of paper to the intimidating man in the black robe. The bailiff stepped forward to intercept it, but the judge waved him off. The judge leaned over and gently took the paper from Leo's hand. He unfolded it slowly. I stopped breathing. I had no idea what those rigid little fingers had managed to write the night before. I watched the judge's face intently. First, his brow furrowed in confusion. Then, his eyes widened slightly. The harsh lines on his face softened. His hand, the one holding the paper, began to shake ever so slightly. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the vast room. The judge swallowed hard. He took off his reading glasses and wiped his eyes. A man who sends kids away every single day was crying. He looked at the social worker, his voice cracking with intense emotion. He told her her report was a disgrace to the justice system. He turned the paper around so the social worker and I could see it. On the page, written in shaky, oversized, uneven letters, were just a few words. It was not a complex essay. It was the raw, unfiltered plea of a child who had finally found his way out of the dark. The paper read, "I am not broken. Sarah loves me. Please let me stay." The spelling was messy, but the message was crystal clear. He had learned the hardest words just to fight for his life. The judge looked down at Leo with a gentle smile I never expected to see. The judge ripped up the transfer order right in front of the social worker. He declared that Leo was clearly capable of emotional connection and learning. He ruled that removing him from the shelter and from my care would be a catastrophic mistake. We had won. That day in court did not just save Leo's life, it completely saved mine, too. Walking out of that courthouse, holding his hand, I felt an incredible sense of clarity. The emptiness that had haunted me for years was completely gone. I knew exactly what my vocation was. The shelter director helped me navigate the complex foster system. As soon as I was stable, I formally adopted him. He is my son now. He still struggles sometimes, but his voice is loud and clear. He never stops writing, and it is the most beautiful thing in the world. Looking back at that broken girl I used to be, I realized that sometimes you have to save someone else to figure out how to save yourself. That little boy gave me a purpose, a career, and a family. What would you have done? Would you have fought the judge for him? Until the next story.